Well, good morning, good evening, wherever you reside. Thank you so much for joining us on this ZENcast Live. Happy to be here. It is May 16th for me, and glad to be here. Thanks, Tom, Don, for coming in, and anybody else that's out there. Feel free to log into chat and give us a shout out. Today we're going to be covering ZCM Remote Management, and the next time we're going to be doing U3 Windows upgrade on a single primary. So we had some requests for remote management last time and thought that was a primary thing. So I got a few things put together on this. Let's talk a little bit about what ZENcast Live is. ZENcast Live is for ZenWorks admins, ZenWorks community, or anybody even wanting to know about ZenWorks. It's here to support you. We broadcast the first and third Tuesday of every month, 9 o'clock Mountain Time. So we're here. You can send in suggestions at zen@microfocus.com. We'll get those. So we just want to make sure that we are in the right forum for you and you're getting everything you need or additional resources for what you have in your environment. You can always go out to the Microfocus Support and Training site, and it has all the other products as well, and we have the Unified Endpoint Management. So you can see hybrid workspaces and then the other four ZENcasts. All the ZENcasts are here, but there's other training in ZenWorks along with any ZENcasts that might relate to ZenWorks and Service Desk and so forth. So these are out here for your disposal. So if you missed this live broadcast, you can go out to the recordings and get the downloads. I'm going to put in chat the PDF to this particular broadcast so you have the links and you can follow along or look at it later, or if you're watching the recording you can grab it. Okay, a little bit of house cleaning. Be sure to log into YouTube, as a couple of you have. You can be involved in chat, you can subscribe and have notifications. The best viewing is the Auto 720p60, just so you know. And remember that the video recordings are posted almost immediately after this particular session ends, and there'll be links to the references in the documentation for downloads and so forth in the comments of that recording. And of course, please put your comments and likes or dislikes in this particular recording, so we know that this is following things that you are interested in or not. We want to make sure we have the right content for you. A few things on tidbits and crumbs. We do have patch scan analyze fails tid that came out just recently. The May PRU just came out. There's other links in here that you can tag onto if you're looking, if it pertains to what you're doing or what you're seeing in your environment. There are monthly webinar topics. So if you go to the monthly webinar topics, you can actually see what we've done as far as a webinar and actually get more details on that particular process, whatever the topic is for that time. April, we had inventory and reporting. If you want to sign up to get these, there's a registration out there as well. All right, so feel free to do that. There's other things here. One thing I did want to make sure I noted is that the 2020 U2 life cycle ended April 30th. You can always go out to this site here. Let me do this. Go to ZenWorks. And again, the link is in my presentation here. If you go to 2020, you can then see, let me expand this, that April 2020, did they extend it? Here we go. Yeah. So April 2023 for update 2. All right, so just be aware, get your systems up. You'll get the latest fixes, you'll get the latest features, and you'll be good to go. So be sure to keep aware of what that support looks like for you. That's maintenance support. You can give us a call if you're down below update 2, if you're update 1, or we still have some customers working from 2017 and we're helping them through those. So if you have questions, there's a few cookbooks out there that help you with that upgrade from 17 or 2020 on up to update 3. All right. Again, we're going to recap what happened last time. We looked at ZenWorks Service Desk, the lifetime log analysis. We had talked about the benefits. We talked about exporting those particular logs and why it's better to export than just copy a particular log. And then the results files, what's in those results files. We viewed some of the lifetime logs, and the tools we used was the Notepad++ with a language file. And that particular language file highlighted things. And we'll see a little bit of that today on my remote management, looking at the log. All right. So that's what we did last time. If you're interested in that, feel free to go back to the recording, download what you need for those resources, and send out a question if you have. We're happy to help. Today's agenda, we're going to be talking about ZCM Remote Management. It won the vote last week for what do we want to do, and so we're going to talk a little bit about remote management and what ZCM has to offer in those areas as far as security, as far as recording, and those types of things. Some of the operation tasks and options, references, and integrations. So all those links will be in this particular presentation. You can download that presentation from the chat. If there's any questions along the way, please put them out here, even if it's not for remote management. If it's a sidebar, we're happy to try and answer those, get those taken care of for you. If we can't, we'll reach out and get some answers for you. All right. So along the way, you have questions, please give us a chat out. So as far as ZCM Remote Management, again, the benefits: securely view the end user's device screen, being able to repair, being able to see what's going on. And now in U3, we can actually record that session. There's also a chat while remoting, so you can actually talk with the individual. And the customer requests, they can also, with the listener, which has been around a long time, the customer can actually request a remote. So maybe you have an area in a factory that doesn't have a phone close by and they need to request assistance on their device. If you have the listener set up, they can request to the help desk a remote. We'll look at a little bit about that as well. Some of the tips: remote control policy. Make sure you have something in place. Obviously, there's a default settings, and then you could adjust those. We'll run through that policy. Anytime you create a policy, make sure you reverse policy. I learned this when I was doing the Active Directory policies, users and groups policy, that I got myself stuck one time and I didn't have a policy to reverse it. So I had to create one and then dispatch it out so that we could actually do what we needed to do, because I didn't have that fully tested. So make sure you have a policy to reverse whatever your settings are if it's something critical. And then ZCC Remote Control requires the latest version. So if you're an admin on the machine, the ZCC helper needs to be that version. All right. So the agent can be older. I will say, I think the agent, if it's U2 and below, may not have the remote control recording and chat functions, because that came in U3. But remote control has been around since ZenWorks pretty much, so you have those. And then the listener needs the agent. Okay, so if you're setting up a listener, if you are an admin and you want them to be able to contact you, the help desk, or the admin to help assist as a technician, you need to have the agent on your machine. All right, so those are a couple benefits and tips just to keep in mind as you work through remote management. As far as operations, ton of operations, right? We have remote management tasks, there's remote control, there's chat, there's view, execute diagnostics, file transfer. Most everything in the top part of this list, except for chat, has been around for a very long time. It's very mature and is very, very stable, including the unblocked remote management. And that comes into play when for some reason it didn't disconnect the remote management side on the desktop, and a new agent can't come in to remote it, you can unblock that remote management. But let's look a little bit on these. There's remote control authentication, remote control options, and other options. If you've seen remote management, you could see that there's a lot of different things in there. Let's see where my remote control is. Here we go. All right, so from a management standpoint, and of course we're in ZenWorks Control Center, we could see our workstations over here, and we can either do an action, obviously, we can select and do an action, and we can do a remote control, remote diagnostic, transfer, and so forth, or we can go into the device itself. Now these devices are dummy devices, so I have a couple here that are actual live devices, like this one here. And well, let me go back and slow down just a little bit. So if I go to 382H, this one here, and check the box, you'll see the actions start populating. So now they're not gray. And I hope that's big enough for you. You could see that okay. So here we are with remote control, remote diagnostics, transfer files, unblock remote management. If we went into the device itself, you could also go into the workstation tasks and see similar requests here for remote control. All right. One thing we mentioned is we want to make sure that we have a remote management policy, and that remote management policy, it's obviously a policy, and when you build it, you can put it where you want to. Typically, I'll put it in a test area before I start and test it out first. So I'll go in here, I'll do a new policy, and actually I believe it's the all general. All right. No, it's not. It's the Windows. Next. So it's a configuration policy, and then we have a remote management policy. Once you get to this point, you give it a name. This is test RM, and put in your notes, this is for finance department, because you may want different remote management policies. Why would you want that? Part of that is you may have a lab, and you may not have users on that device when you need to remote control it. So it may be logged out. So you don't want to even ask for permission. You just want to remote control that box straight away. Whereas in finance, there may be a security policy where you have to make sure you have permission before going into the remote management. So you could have multiples. Closest one wins, meaning in your objects, if one remote management is related to a folder and another one to a device, the device wins. So the one related to the device will get the most, will get the precedence. Okay, and then it walks you through the wizard of the different remote management general settings, right? Allow user to request a remote session. This would be a listener, and we'll show that in the agent. Terminate remote session, display a remote audit information on the user's managed device. So there's different things, and you'll see these repeated in similar ones repeated for the different tasks that remote management can do, because again, you have file transfer, you have chat, you have recording, and so forth. You can then say want to, for your message, we edit this, you could say device from the help desk. So from Digital Airlines help desk wants to perform. Okay. And then you have your listeners. So this is where the client, the end user, can request a remote management session. And you want, so on the admin side, you want to have this listener running. So you'd basically put in your listener alias, your IP address, and it runs on 5550, and it will be just listening. And as soon as somebody requests, your device will be in the list for them to select. Okay. Now, notice that this one was the general settings. The next one is the remote control settings. And again, we go through different steps. A lot of these will be the same because it's all about permissions and signals and giving audible beeps and so forth, depending on if it's remote control or diagnostics and so forth. All right, we'll just take the defaults, and you can see remote view. Maybe you want to view and follow somebody what they're doing, but not necessarily interact. So that's remote view versus remote control. And then remote diagnostics will run a series of diagnostics info and stuff so that you can gather some information while you're working on that device and remoting that device. Okay. And again, ask permission on the managed device, give visible signal. All of these come into play with the different various types of settings. Here's remote execute. Remote execute is really cool because if somebody's having a hard time executing because they don't have permissions, well, you don't want to go into the box, give them permission so that they can run it necessarily. So you can actually run it through remote execute at an elevated level so that it runs, because it just may be a one-time thing. Or you're running some type of routine that needs to be run on that box, and to see what's going on with this with their issue, you can do a remote execute at an elevated level, which is really, really cool. We use that quite a bit at my previous employer. And then file transfer is just like file transfer. If you've done it once, you've done it the same way over and over again, very similar to what you've seen before. It does have a couple of other things, not to allow or to allow files to be downloaded from a managed device. So it has some restrictions and some permissions. And then file transfer root directory. Okay. This one is the the security settings. This is probably one of the most particular settings that you want to really pay attention to as far as password authentication. Enable password-based authentication, which means instead of them saying yes to allow, maybe it's a secured environment where they have to actually put in a password and audibly tell you or somehow tell you the password so you can log in. Okay. Enable intruder detection, enable session encryption, and abnormal termination. What do you want to do? Log off user, lock device. Okay. So these are real good. And as far as password type, persistent, you can see here clear and set, depending on what you're using for your password authentication. Again, one thing to remember as you're on these sections, for instance, security settings, if you go current page, it will then bring up the current page for security settings. All right, so if you're not certain, this is a handy list of what is on this page so that you can get more explanation of what those settings are for. And that's in any page that you're in. It takes you right to that page. Then it gives you a conclusion, basically a summary, and tells you what's enabled and what's not. The final thing is create as a sandbox, and is typically checked because you don't want to have this. This is probably not permanent right away because there's other things you'd want to edit in this particular policy that may not relate to the setting so much, but to the policy itself. And then if you were to hit finish right now, in this case, let me go here, down here. So if we were to hit finish, it would then go back to where we started this process, the folder we started, and it would be available to be selected. If I want to go right into it right away to define those additional properties, I'll check this box and I'll hit finish. Then it opens it up. Otherwise, it just puts us in the test area and view, and we could see it available to select. But since we did add additional properties, it opens it up for you. And then you can add administrator notes. You can enable, disable certain things if you need to. So this is kind of handy if you go, oh, well, maybe let me look this over again and see these details, and maybe I need to, not ask for permission and just go in for remote control. Those types of things. Of course, we are set to go pretty much here for now. We put in who it's for. We haven't obviously associated it. We can go ahead and publish this if we feel it's ready. Notice it's in the sandbox. If I publish, I could say either as a new version, just like bundles, new version, which it will then be version 0, or publish as a new policy. So the nice thing is you could copy this policy. If you publish as a new policy, you give it a name, it'll drop it in the folder that you're looking for, and it will create a new policy from that. So you don't have to redo settings if you have particular settings set up. And we can hit finish, and we'll see now that it's published as 0. If any changes happen in this, I don't know if Notes actually does this. This is for the Finance Department policy settings. I think admin notes is excluded from having to be published. Yeah. Okay, just like in bundles. But if you were to change any setting coming over here or requirements, it'll then ask you again to publish. So allow user to request, we'll say yes, and we'll go down to the bottom, hit apply. Notice the publish and revert comes up. And you'll see we now have a sandbox. We still have our original, and we could always revert back. So that way it makes it simple. Oh, well, maybe I don't want to do that. Or maybe you want to publish it as another test remote management policy. Also, so if I do a revert, here's a sandbox, I'll revert. You'll see now that the sandbox is gone. So basically it's a clear on whatever changes you had if you got a revert. The nice thing is if you're working with somebody else and you need to tell them, I'm working on this policy, you can actually cut and paste this particular link in, and when they click on it, it will actually take them directly to this policy. So there's no confusion. All right. There are other things like pre-cached contents, right? Where it's going on the target server. I only have one server, so it's just going to be available. But you can have settings. Now, if you wanted to override the default settings, you can go ahead and click override and then do whatever changes you needed. And then you can hit apply, and it would go ahead and ask you to publish that as well. Okay? So that's what the override is. Very handy. All right, and then there's sandbox settings. Do you want to sync content to content servers? Then older policy version, retain. So the nice thing is you can do cleanup this way. So do not retain any older versions. Typically, if I make a change, so let's go ahead and do that. Cancel, test. Let's go in here. We will go ahead and go into details. We'll say allow, hit apply. We're going to publish as version 1. So now we can see 0 and 1. If you went into the settings, you can see do not retain any older. That's what it's referring to. because you basically do not need that anymore. You would not distribute an older version. Now, there may be cases where you would, so be careful, because if you're using this sandbox in a test environment and you're ready and you're testing it and you do publish it as 1, right? It'll delete 0 and you may want to keep that. So be careful with this one. That's why retain all versions is by default. All right. If there's any question, that's just a little bit about publishing and sandbox and so forth. Questions, shout them out. We're going to continue on with our remote management, which we have here. So you can see this one's been edited a few times. I've been just kind of playing with it out there. And we're going to go ahead. We can see the relationships is to all workstations. All right. You can do workstations. You can also have user assignments. Okay. So depending on if somebody's logged in or not. Again, if you have a lab that you're working on and you're remote at that time and you want to get into one of the boxes, if it's associated with the workstation, you can have that policy not ask for permission. By default, it asks for permission, the policy, when you do a remote control. All right, so there's our remote management policy. The details are pretty much default. I did say allow user to request. You can see, do you want to allow Digital Airlines Help Desk to remote control this device as a message? Allow managed device to be remote controlled remotely and ask for permission. You'll see ask for permission on the remote control, which is what we're going to do today. If we do remote diagnostics, it'll just go through a remote view. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go to this particular device. We will go ahead and do a remote control. Now we're going to get a wizard that pops up. I do have an ESXi. Let's log in here. I'm going to minimize. Let's see what's next over here. This just shows some of the areas that we talked about. All right. On the admin side, we showed there's tasks, there's the workstation tasks, there's this, which we're about to cover, and then what the result is on the admin side so that you can do different actions. But I'm going to go ahead and minimize this and make this full screen so you have a little bit more visibility here. We have this guy. If I remember correctly, we'll log in as student. And he's up and running. Now, one thing to note, in the policy, I said I can ask for remote assistance, right? So a listener has to be set up in that remote policy for that to work. Technician application, if we go to policies, we can see that we're version 6 of the remote management policy. Okay, that's the one that takes precedence. It's successfully loaded. You can see over to the right. So if you make a change, you want to make sure that the agent refreshes so it has the latest details. Now back to ZCC. We're going to that desktop. We can always default to the IP address. Sometimes if DNS isn't set up or a lab environment, this really is helpful. But if you use the drop down, you can see the device is there as well. But whatever IP address is in there, you can go ahead and run. There are more options. Okay, if you want to use the legacy remote management viewer, if you want to, the session is collaborative. You want 2 people going into remote this device to view this desktop, or shared, or just exclusive. Typically it's collaborative, so you can pass it off to another individual if there's something going on. You can enable logging right here, and then if you do have to use a join proxy, you can. All right. So we're going to go ahead and just use these defaults, and we're going to do remote control. We're not going to do view or execute. We're going to do writes. You can also pass a password. And maybe we'll try both of those. But we'll go ahead and hit OK here. And it will go use the ZCC helper. Again, you have to make sure that's the same one as your zone, and this pops up on my other screen. I have two screens, and it's saying, okay, I see that desktop, I'm authenticating, waiting for the user to accept the request. So if we go over to the user device, remember that's this device here. Let me minimize this so we can see what's going on. And you can see, do you want to allow Digital Airlines Help Desk to remote control this device? And if we say yes, it will then give us a screen with the remote management here. All right, so this kind of stays up and is visible for the remote management, for the end user to see that it's being remote managed. All right, and if I click on it, I could see who the operator is. It's a ZenWorks admin. This is a time frame and so forth. Okay. Now this is where it's going to get confusing because we have two screens here. On my machine, I have this, and what I'm going to do is I don't know how tiny I want this. There we go. So this stays in the ESX. This is on mine. I'm the admin at this point. Okay. You can see I have some controls here across the top that are visible. And depending on the settings of the remote management policy, I can do these different tasks. Okay, some of them are default. Most of these here are default all the time. But if we're not allowed to record or we're not allowed to chat, then those would be grayed out. I can go ahead and say I want to record this, and notice over here it says, oh, recording is in process. So they are alerted to any recording that is going on. If I want to chat, I can then open up my chat. Now this is theirs. This is the tricky part. That where is. So if I go, I can minimize that. Good day. All right. So I just typed on the remote management screen over here. Good day. So basically, I was the end user. This is my chat for admin. So, good day, student. How are you? Right? And it appears on there. Notice the notifications comes up for Windows. All right. And we are still recording this process. You can see that we're in chat mode. Is everything okay now? And they could respond and say, yes, thank you. And you can see that it says who each individual is. We're seeing this one because this is the remote control portion of it. We'll go ahead and cancel chat. All right. There are other things in here as well. You know, the viewer itself, what do you want it displayed as? You notice that the background changed when we remote controlled, and that was to save latency, to give us better latency. We got information about the device itself. Okay. If we wanted to refresh, and that's refreshing the screen on my side as an admin. So in case we're having some video or latency issues, we can do that. If we want to do Control-Alt-Delete on that device, we can. And then of course the windows as well. And then you have your key downs. All right. If we then wanted to transfer files, we could. You can see my admin box has a bunch of different drives, and they have just one which is a, let's say we'll pass this log over to J. I'll go here and we'll do a transfer. All right. So it's that simple. All right. If you've done one file transfer, you've done this. This won't be any big issue. All right. Switch displays, if we needed to switch displays, we could. If we wanted to disconnect, we can. If we wanted to lock and lock the mouse keyboard, which could be very important, right? Some users love to try and follow along and show you things while you're trying to work. You can then lock the keyboard. And then you have your session collaboration. If somebody else is going to jump in, you can see who has it. You can give them control. You can see the regain control here for you, or invite. We don't have anybody else in this case. Okay. And then, of course, your remote execute, which I mentioned. Task man. Let's see if we can run this. Oh, MGR. On the remote device, here it is. Okay. Then we get into some of the new U3 stuff, which is the chat, which we saw, right? If I select chat, I say I want to chat with you. This is my chat. Notice that if I select chat on the admin side, it opens me up to start a chat. It doesn't present until I send something. Okay? And vice versa. So if the user wants to chat and they select this, I won't get anything until they send something. All right? So it's dependent on that, obviously, because there's nothing to do. Now, the record, you could pause. Notice it said recording is paused, and on their screen it says recording is paused. You have some scale in and scale outs, and full screen, and obviously help. All right. So we're going to say this is pretty much done with the remote control. We've captured the issue. We're going to go ahead and disconnect. All right. Notice the icon here for remote, which is this guy here. And if you double click it, it comes up with who's remote controlling you. We can go ahead and terminate. It's going to ask, oh, it's going to tell me, oh, by the way, Mr. Admin, they closed the managed device. All right. And their background again appeared as it should. All right. Is there an auditing that can be done in remote sessions that would satisfy a security audit? Great question, Don. We're going to get into that. That's a great segue. Yes. So if we go into configuration and we go to audit management and events, now it all depends on the security policies, right? What you have in place for the environment. But in this case, we're going to do an agent event. So I've said for any remote management chat, hang on to it for 5 days, and it's a class warning, right? Somebody remote managed me, okay? And you could set these any category you want. This is critical, all right? So I also did a user logged in, user logged out, logged in fail. So auditing is quite effective in this case. There's also change events. So if you're doing system updates, if there's a bundle modified, so the system or change events is for the ZenWorks control management system. And then the agent event is reflecting what has happened on the end device. Okay. So great question. We'll see a little bit of this as we go through. To view that, once you have it set up, so let's add one. All right. And this is agent events. So if we look here, we are currently on agent events in the configuration. We're going to add an agent event, right? We want to know if it ever gets wiped. All right, this is a critical issue. I want to keep this for 50 days. Okay, you can also send the log via email, send out a SNTP or message to the syslog or whatever. Okay, if we do that, we can hit apply. Then notice it disappears from here. If it's not here, it's being set. It's enabled. So these are all the unset events. Okay. And these are the set events. Okay, we'll notice now that we have the wipe is in here for 50 days. Okay. Now the remote sessions, I already have these enabled, the recording, the remote control, remote diagnostics chat. I enabled them all. If we wanted to, we can go ahead and remove them, right? But I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. Oh, it's removed, so I need to add it back in. Add remote. Notice recording came back in, and hit apply. Oh, I need to set it. This is going to be I want it critical. Keep it 5 days. Don't need to send anything, but I want to be able to view it. Okay. All right, so remote is back in there. Recording is back in there for 5 days. Critical, no longer just a warning. All right. You can edit it. Maybe I want to change this one to critical. And we have that set. Now, again, as your question says, auditing that can be done in remote sessions that would satisfy a security audit. The results of this would come into audit and messages. So if we go to audit and messages, we have events. And remember, we talked a little bit about change events, which is the system. Okay. Bundles are bundles being created or moved around or whatever. Then there's agent events. Now, there's one critical event here, and that's because I imported one this morning, which used the configuration location change. So you can see the event details here. Now you're going to ask me, well, where's your recording? Unfortunately, or fortunately, it has to obviously record, save, upload to the server, notify the database, and say, hey, I have this file out here that's the recording, right? So it won't appear here for about 20 to 30 minutes. So I probably should have done this first, but I did capture, when I was doing my testing, some of the things that occurred. So I'm going to go, if I go big screen, it won't matter. But you can see this is basically this event here. I went to agent events and I selected whichever one it was critical, probably. It was a warning for remote control. This session happened and there's a date and time. And then if I double clicked, for instance, the recording, you'll get the session, you'll get the session details of the remote control. So you can see I've done a couple of, I did a recording and I did a start, I did a pause, I did a stop on that device, and it all recorded through. You know, that's H2UFP. Let me go over there and see if we can remote control that guy. I'm going to sidetrack here real quick, because that one came in. But I don't remember having that device. I wonder if that was on my other system where I took this screenshot. Recording. But you can see for the audit purposes, you can see what started, when it was paused, and when it was stopped. And now you could also see the download recording of the FBS file, and if you want to convert it to an MP4. So you are able to view the file. If you don't have an FBS, which most people do not, you get a codec. Well, you could do the convert to FBS to MP4, and it'll automatically do that and save locally. And the agent location is here. Just so you know, the agent location is here, and it will ship it up to the server location here. All right, it's content repo, data external, which is ZCC remote control recording. That particular, I do have a screenshot or a file. So I cleared my logging before starting this, and I started a remote control session. So you can see remote management module. You can see it's not in debug, okay, which is fine. We don't need it to be. You get a lot more detail in here, and the logs are longer, so I just made it simple. All right. We could see that we're going to, here's a host, connection status. You can see connect manager, okay? And we started recording, and then when we stopped recording, it is 150, so it's in that zone. You can see that it went ahead and uploaded successfully to the location. So this is the ZMD messages log. So it will be posted in the ZMD messages log. So you could see if it had gotten that far. And then you could be able to, but you should be able to go into ZCC and actually view that remote management. Let's see if it came in yet. My system isn't so tuned, but it's pretty basic. But it would come in here. You'd see major events. You'd click on major events or information, whatever. It would come up with the list of those, and then you could click on these to basically see this setting of remote recordings. I don't know if that satisfies a security audit, depending on what your security audit requests, but it definitely is a lot of detail and things that you can present should there be an issue. In a previous employer, we had to actually monitor a classroom and a student, and we actually had don't show them. We went into our remote management policy and details. Sure, Don. We basically said, okay, in my lab where we have students, I don't need to ask for permission for remote control if they're going to be, because I'm helping them out anyhow. But if we're monitoring somebody, we actually had to monitor somebody, we could actually not give any visible signal, which would take away that square box that you saw. Okay. So depending on your security policy, it allows you to do certain things. But if you're doing investigative work, or if you're just doing remote control with help desk, or if your security officer says everything has to ask permission, you can do that. And maybe the permission is password on the go. So they could select password to do that. All right. So yeah, I'm kind of disappointed that didn't show up. I did it this morning also, so I have a couple of events in here that haven't showed up yet, but I'm confident that they will. It's just a matter of time. Notice that critical event went away. Oh no, it didn't. It's over here. And that's the other thing. Remember that you have two tabs here, right? You have a tab here, which is your dashboard. So we could see that this workstation came in. This is probably the critical one where we did a location change. So if I select this, does this go to the device, or does it go? No, it goes directly here. So this is the one here for that device. So you do have a dashboard here as well. So that's kind of handy as far as seeing what the status is. And these are all obviously location changes. And this is the top 10 device because it's the only one we've really done so far. All right. Q30VHM. I really want to go to that guy. Let's go. Oh, let's do this. This will make it easier. Sorry, audit. And we can go here. It says it's in workstations, but you can always go to devices and search. Okay. Let's do a remote control on this guy. Remote control. Okay. Oh, that's 200. And of course, you've seen this if you've done remote control before. Accept the certificate permanently, temporarily for this session, or do not. You can hit OK. Waiting for the user to request. So this device is up and running. It's 200. I'm trying to remember. I can actually show you the recording if we can get recording on this device. So where's my 200? There's that one. There's this one. Oh, there it is. Okay. So let's go. Oh, this is my slow machine, so I really didn't think it was performing today. We're going to say yes. I think this is, I don't know what version this is. Let's look. Technician help. And we will see what version it is. In the meantime, we can hit chat. I can go over to my device and I can hit record. And I'm going to go ahead and hit chat, which will open up a chat window for me. This is a student. And it'll open up a chat for me. Admin. Okay. We can close this. We can then, yeah, see it's real slow. Message received by. We're going to go ahead and stop the recording. We're going to go ahead and terminate the session. And I don't think it's quick enough to upload, but we'll see. Audit messages, events, agent events. Yeah, not yet. It'll take about 20-30 minutes for it to come up, but then you'll see it here. I'm pretty confident it'll show up. So this is what comes in. You can convert the file to an MP4, which then you can give to your security team or whatever team you're looking at to figure out the issue. And then you're good to go. As far as references, and you saw in the ZMD messages, so we had that. This is the language I had previously for the ZenWorks logging that I had in previous recording. I'll put that in the comments or description so that you can download that language file, which helps make these colors. All right, and then you can tailor them as your needs. Some other things. The ZCM debugging been around since I can't remember when it was originated. It was, it's been around, well, 2008. Okay, it's been updated each version. You have adaptive agent, you have bundles, you have XSplat agent startup, all the debugging and how to go about ZCM debugging. It is being remastered by Arvind to the master debug logging reference guide. The old one is still here, but we're tailoring it so that it's a little more modern looking. So you have the link here for the legacy logging TID. But if you're looking just for ZenWorks agent, you don't have to scroll so hard anymore. You can go to the ZenWorks agent and pull up these individual TIDs for the different topics. All right, very important. I note that before we end our session today, so you know that this document is available. And this link will also be in the. I'll put it in chat now. It'll be in the description of this recording. Where's this one here? All right. So there's that. All right, so that's very important to know. There's also remote control documentation, obviously out there. You can see what's going on, and again, the help tells you specifically. Oh, that one didn't work. Specifically, what's going on that page. The other thing I didn't have time to show you today was the ZCM ZSD integration. When you go to ZSD and you have that up and you've imported your ZCM devices, you can actually be in a request call 60 in ZSD, and it will launch the ZCM agent remote control. So I don't know if I have a device in here that's for that. No, this is something different. But if you notice over here, if we brought it in through ZCM, you could click bundle management, and it'll show you the bundles, and you could actually do some bundle management here, and you can do remote management. And I think you'll recognize it's pretty much that: remote management, remote control, and so forth. So that way they don't need to go into ZCC if the help desk is using this particular service desk. They can just remote control it directly from here. All right, so that makes it fairly handy for them. And that's a ZCM ZSD integration. There's also ZRS if you wanted to get some more auditing information done. ZRS can pull some of that out as well, depending on your security policy. Okay, so that's all I have today. We're going to cover a few things. There's a schedule in here, so if you download the PDF, you have all of these links that are coming up. I'm going to go through them real quick. June 6th, we're going to do the ZCM Update 3 Windows upgrade real quick. We have some other future requests. If you have any requests, please send them to zen@microfocus.com. And we will fit them into the schedule. So we appreciate the shout out last week for doing remote control, and we got that taken care of. If you look at the ZENcast Live upcoming schedule, it will appear here, and you can see not only what's coming up, but also what we've done, as well as there's a table here of all the different ZENcasts we've done. If you don't know where the YouTube is, it takes you directly to the YouTube for those topics. All right. So the past 3 years are out here. We're currently on Update 3. Update 4 is coming out. If you're on the beta or want to be on the beta, please send a note to zen@microfocus.com. Darren will get you dialed in for that beta. ZSD beta will be coming up. It'll be announced shortly. It'll be a very short beta, whereas the ZenWorks will be a little bit longer. We are currently at Hybrid Workspaces. See, I didn't change this from last week. 23.1. Okay. ZRS 7.8 is out, and 8.1.1 will be out any time now. Okay. Unless I missed it while I was gone, that it's been released. So the public betas announcements are here. So feel free to, if you have this particular slideshow, to look through these details. These are the futures coming up. ZCM 23.3 will basically be Update 4. We're changing our version structure to year and quarter. So that's why you're seeing these all matching up now. Okay. And then there's things on the community out there for different things. ZCM lookbook, upgrade cookbooks, ZSD lookbooks. If you're trying to figure out if you need to get to how to get to Update 3, this is out there. The lookbooks and stuff. So there's a lot of resources in this particular PowerPoint, as well as some latest TIDs that are out there that may or may not pertain to you. So you can go ahead and click on those. You have those resources at your fingertips. All right. We are trying real hard to make sure that the community ideas are out there, and we're really looking at them real close, trying to make sure that the votes and the high votes are getting some priority. Sometimes it can't come in so soon because of the structure of the coding, but for instance, Service Desk is going through some changes. I'm not going to do a couple of my enhancement requests because on those modern changes, they're going to come in at that point. But there are other live casts, Filer, GroupWise, ZenWorks, and OES iPrint webinars every month. And then the recordings. TTP USA is coming up. It's going to be in July. It's going to be in person in Provo. All right. And there are other links here. Next week topic, we will be doing ZCM U3 Windows upgrade. I appreciate everybody that's been here. I hope I answered some questions. You got some stuff out of this. Feel free to send me an email, paul.pedron@microfocus.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have, or get you those answers from somebody that can. Otherwise, I bid you adieu. I appreciate everybody that's here, joined us today, and I hope you have a good week, and we'll see you on the 6th for another session. Thank you very much.